Welcome back. Today, we're going to do a deep dive and review on a game called Nobody Wants to Die. Nobody Wants to Die was released on July 17th, 2024 for the Xbox Series consoles, PS5, and Steam. The game takes place in New York City in the year 2329, about 300 years into the future. The environment and the aesthetics of the weapons, vehicles, and various equipment that you will use is heavily reminiscent of the 1920s. The dials and gauges are analog rather than digital, but we still have more advanced technology. Now, this game is not a first-person shooter. In fact, that's one of the few times you're actually going to pull the trigger on that beautiful gun they give you. This game is a narrative-focused noir that has you investigating a murder. It plays more like a choose-your-own-adventure book or an interactive story rather than a game that we're more used to. This game has you rotating between 4 highly advanced pieces of equipment, depending on what the investigation requires at that time. This is the Reconstructor. It allows you to rewind time and rebuild the crime scene based on clues that you find. And you're going to find these clues with tools such as the handheld X-ray pictured here, or the UV light that you saw earlier. Now, all of these tools are going to be very limited in their application in the game, and they're only going to be useful when the game wants them to be useful. Here's the camera used to document the crime scene and find other clues, but it has very weird and janky movement, and it's very hard to spot the clues sometimes. Now let's talk about what this game does right. In my opinion, the Reconstructor is the strongest point of this game. The ability to manipulate time and have it move as slowly as you want, forward or backwards, is absolutely awesome. I love these scenes that you're able to create here. As you rebuild the crime scene, you can see all the detail that they put into it. Here you see the spark going up the tree and it explodes. Boom. Look at that lighting, that's absolutely gorgeous. You got the debris flying, the explosion igniting, the body that's hanging gets pushed to the side by the concussive force. It's just so well built. The aesthetic is fantastic too. I like this retro futuristic thing that they got going on. There's also a lot of references to the show Twin Peaks.
Fire up the board here.
No.
Go the old way then. In the meantime, I'll summarize the Red Room for you.
The Red Room?
It's a piece of fucked up history. Better buckle up.
And here is the infamous Red Room. And as you can see, the devs took a lot of inspiration from the show. They even got the headless naked statue in there, with the red drapes and everything. And earlier in the scene, beforehand, you saw the lightning flash, and that kind of is reminiscent of David Lynch's flashes of light when something important happens. Here, I just tried to recreate a scene using David Lynch's method of filming where you focus on inanimate objects as other things are happening. I just thought this whole rewinding of time and stuff is pretty cool. One of the really cool details that I noticed as this goes on is if you look in the mirror up there, you can actually see movement happening. And I thought that was a really awesome detail that they had. As you can see, this scene was directly inspired by Twin Peaks, but the overall plot has some similarities with the overall plot of Twin Peaks as well. There's also references to other great works, inspirations from other great works, like Altered Carbon and Blade Runner. Overall, I'd say this game has a lot going for it. But it's time to talk about those demerits. What makes this game not as great in my opinion? As you can see here on this crashed airship, there's debris and chairs and furniture littering the room, but it's almost as if they don't exist, they're an illusion. Even the debris you can run through, and I thought that was kind of not as great. So we got environmental clipping. Sometimes the function of the Reconstructor doesn't quite work right. Like here, we got the head shot off, but if you try to rewind, sometimes it gets stuck and you gotta fast forward, rewind in order to get it back where you want to get that shot that you want to get. Not a major problem, but it was slightly annoying. Now, another discrepancy that I noticed, and this was after hours of playing the game and manipulating the mechanics of it, was that sometimes there's a distortion in the space-time continuum. For example, objects will make an impact before they even reach the victim. Like, take this piece of rebar, we're gonna rewind. It's coming at this dude, and it's gonna have a blood spurt in his chest before the rebar impales him. And that was just kind of inconsistent with what we've seen so far. Another example is this guy gets shot in the head, we see the blood spurt, but the bullet wound doesn't appear until a few moments after he snaps his head backward, which is kind of weird and definitely in reverse. This next one, I'm not sure if it was intentional mechanic or not, but occasionally when you're using the reconstructor, the victim will disappear behind some weird distortion. I was also not a fan of the way they portrayed blood. Like this scene, for example, looks elementary and maybe from the 360 era. Liquids were also a problem. Here we have a full bottle of liquor with the top open, and he's turning it upside down but nothing's spilling out. Which brings me to our next point. Our character will take several drinks from his flask, and every time he does, nothing comes out. Also, he takes pills in order to stem the effects of the episodes that he experiences. But every time he pops that bottle open and knocks a few back, it doesn't look like any pills are moving or even coming out. And this happens almost every time he does this through the campaign. The only time he does something different, he tries to pour some pills in his hand in one part and nothing comes out. And I thought that felt kind of weird, kind of half-baked. One of the story beats I had beef with was in this scene you have this super trained army guy coming to take out a civilian and gets his ass absolutely handed to him. Like, fucking come on, dude. And the final demerit I'm going to highlight has to do, once again, with the reconstructor. Occasionally, when you're using the reconstructor, you're going to have to use it at a certain spot, and what that's going to do is it's kind of going to get in the way of the scene that's supposed to happen. Like here, we try to use it and we're wigging out because we're in the dude's way. This is just felt like kind of like an oversight to me, but it also led to some pretty hilarious moments. For example, if you stand in this exact spot and use the reconstructor, you actually end up standing on top of the dude's head. I just thought that was such a fun glitch. I did it over and over again just because I couldn't stop laughing. I was just floating on this dude's head, no big deal, blip, 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 blip. The reconstructor overall is an amazing addition to this game. It adds a lot of player agency where you otherwise wouldn't have it, but it does have its issues. It does feel like sometimes these mechanics are a little bit broken, even if they are hilarious. Now we're going to get into scoring this game, which I found to be the most difficult part of this review. I am not a fan of Telltale games. I'm not a fan of storybook games where the game holds your hand and basically you click to advance the story. However, this game did introduce some awesome mechanics, which I found, even if they were broken, were fun and great to use. So overall, I'm going to say this game is about a 7, but it's a really strong 7. Objectively, 7.5. Too many glitches, too many bugs. Subjectively, not my cup of tea. But don't get me wrong, this is an amazing game if you're into Telltale games. I highly recommend it. Thanks for taking the time to watch this. I hope you enjoyed the review, and I plan to review more content soon.